validation, now I validate myself. Building inner strength, putting doubt up on the shelf. No more unnecessary drama, no more wasted time. Climbing higher constantly, making my own climb. Standing on higher ground, where excellence is found. My potential knows no bounds. Raising the bar, breaking ground. My network is my net worth. Choose your company wise. Surround yourself with eagles, not with sheep in disguise. Every interaction is a reflection of my brand. Quality over quantity, that's my personal command. Standing on higher ground, where excellence is found. My potential knows no bounds. Raising the bar, breaking ground. Whoa. I'm not just living, I'm manifesting my vision. Cutting through limitations with surgical precision. My expectations are my compass, my respect is my shield. To mediocrity and chaos, I will never yield. I'm not just living, I'm manifesting my vision. Cutting through limitations with surgical precision. My expectations are my compass, my respect is my shield. To mediocrity and chaos, I will never yield. Standing on higher ground, where excellence is found. My potential knows no bounds. Raising the bar, breaking ground. I'm not just living, I'm manifesting my vision. Cutting through limitations with surgical precision. My expectations are my compass, my respect is my shield. To mediocrity and chaos, I will never yield.
How y'all doing, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to This and That. I'm your host, Xander, where we're talking about this, that, and everything in between. Special shout out to OG Cooks. Or, hold on, OG Kicks. Oh, man, I was thinking about cooking just now. uh, off to a good start. Off to a good start. We're about 8 minutes late in comparison to what we said we were going to do. But you know how it is. We're live 7 nights a week. We do not let the sun rise without going live, but we don't always start on time. That's why we ask you guys to like, subscribe, hit the notification button, mash those reaction buttons, and go and check out the membership and see what's going on. Because we do put a lot of information in the membership. I have been slacking on that for a little bit, but we do put a lot of information into the membership. I've actually made sure that I put the relevant stuff into the membership first, and then I got to catch up with all the rest of the stuff that is at your leisure. So um, there's been a lot of things going on, a lot of things going on. Like for example, I talked to you guys about how the new cars are negatively impacting your ability to have your personal privacy in your vehicles. I come to find out as recent that there was a 2021 bill passed that kind of fizzled out. Funding was provided where they had kind of made it into law that the vehicles were supposed to have by 2027 going forward the I guess it's for DUI purposes, all of the stuff that we've been talking about with tracking your vitals and all of this other stuff to make sure that you're not impaired in the vehicle. But it goes much deeper, as we've talked about plenty of times before, of how intrusive this technology can be because it doesn't have a regulatory structure. The bill that was passed only demands and grants the authority to supply every brand new vehicle that's created with the type of technology that collects the type of personal data about you while you're operating your vehicle that is, unregulated for the most part as it stands. So far, dealerships have the original control over the data because they're the ones collecting it from the vehicles that they sell. But who they can disperse the information to and why is unchecked. So that is a concern because it was something that was passed in 2021. So it's not like you can undo it unless they actually go through the motions of actually trying to address it now. And of recent times, somebody did try to bring it up and say, "Hey, let's unfund this situation," and nobody wanted to unfund it. So because that discussion came about, we actually were in a position where they dismantled everything, right? That puts uh, the word of mouth out there to all the people who are like, "Oh snap, this is what it is." Now, uh, beyond that situation, we've got the new private jet. Well, not really a private jet. It's more like the new presidential plane that was gifted to Donald Trump uh, to the United States, and he signed it into the White House. Then there's the funding that's going there. Special shout out to Bear North from Wisconsin. So he was supposed to be taking some tax dollars and making it CIA worthy. So the new Air Force One was recently debuted, and that was actually pretty interesting. So didn't really cost that much tax dollars to make it happen, but I mean it was cheaper than America building a whole nother plane. Um, Donald Trump's talking about glorifying the White House, so we're going to see a lot of changes in the White House coming soon, and that's going to come out of tax dollars. But renovating the White House, where you're customizing it to the personal style of the current president, is something that is put into the budget for every presidential party that's in the White House. So that's something that we're going to be not really dealing with because I mean tax dollars are already gone and allocated towards stuff like that. But we haven't seen anything else in the because I mean I could talk about the plane because the plane's not the big deal. Today, what we're going to be talking about is the money. And typically, when I come and talk to you guys, because we talk about different topics every night of the week. Sunday, we talk about questions and comments from the fans. When y'all have questions about y'all, we talk about stuff. We try to get things worked out for y'all. Then on Mondays, we talk about how politics negatively impacts your ability to make, save, and invest money. And that's what we're talking about today is something that is actually that is going into effect right now that is going to compromise the way you do what you do in comparison to the way you used to do things. Sup, Daniel? Eee, wow, wow. That's the Gen Z version of 6'7". Anyway, uh, so so today we're gonna be going deep down into it, and you guys, I want you guys to stay tuned and mash those reaction buttons because if you live in California or Texas, this is directly going to impact you guys. And for everybody else, you just got to know like what's going on in your country because it actually does make sense. Even if you don't live in California, if you go to California on vacation or if you go to Texas on vacation and you're moving money around in certain ways, like this stuff is going to impact you while you're out there. Um, and then some of the other things that I found out if you're trying to do big business transactions or small business transactions, because I mean, if you're in real estate and you're knocking this back, we're going to be talking about how that impacts you today as well. So stay tuned tonight. We've got a few hours worth of information, so as long as you can be here, hang out here. Now, Tuesday we give you guys different ways to make money, save money, and invest money. So notice how Monday we talk about how the rules and laws change that interferes with your ability to do what you wanted to do. And then Tuesday we start talking about new ways to do what you want to do, right? They play off of one another. Then Wednesday we talk about different countries around the world that you can potentially live in and invest in. And that comes to play when we start thinking about the discussion that we had with Sterling last week, I think Thursday night, Friday morning, that 9 hour podcast that we had, when he was giving me a scenario where, you're working a minimum wage job, you're stuck on government benefits, you're under $30,000 a year income, you have health coverage concerns that's not being covered, and then how do you survive off of stuff like that? And the only thing I didn't tell him in that scenario, because I was like, well, lower your expenses so that your paycheck can go further, or get another job, or make more money so that you have more money to go places, or dial back to a less effective medication, which isn't always good for your health, but if you survived off of it the last 30 something years, you can survive off of it for another 10, and then build your brokerage account, and then you'll be generating enough revenue to do what you got to do. But the other option would have been, well, Philippines will give you extended revolving residency if you have a consistent $24,000 a year income. So if you qualify for food stamps in America, you qualify for residency in the Philippines. You could very well take your money and go to another country and get the same or better medical care, because America is like at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes down to healthcare. So if you went to another country, you might get better doctors. So while his medication might be $1,200 in the United States because it's the United States, his medication in the Philippines might have been $600, and it might actually would have been covered under the health insurance if you got an international health insurance plan. So these are the things that we talk about to help you guys do better and be better. Because if he's on a limited income, he's working, dollars for donuts, and then he decides, well, I'm going to go ahead and do something online, create me a little side hustle. I'm making like $1,000 a month. Social Security still giving me my disability. I'm getting my $1,000 a month offline. I can take that thousand. I can take that combined $2,000 a month, go to the Philippines, show them I'm bringing in $2,000 a month, and the Philippines will give me residency. Boom. Now I can go live somewhere else cheaper than what I live in America, get a better standard of living, probably get me an in-home nurse. And all I had to do was just change locations, right? It's theoretically easy to do, but in practice, it's not that easy to do, because one of the first things you have to think about is changing your mindset, and then accepting change and new beginnings. One of the hardest parts about accepting change and new beginnings is the anxiety and the fear of change, whether it's the fear of change and failure, the fear of change and success, the fear of attempting it at all. You know what I mean? These things actually interfere with your ability to do what you got to do. And that's what leads us into our Thursday, Friday, and Saturday shows, where we give you guys information about self improvement, personal development, relationship topics, socialization, negotiation, building your brand, raises, promotions, retirement, forced retirement, termination, and then ultimately building your 20 or 30-year plan. Because if you know where you want to be at in life and what you got to do to get there, then you can genuinely put forth the steps today to accomplish those goals. Because like when I asked everybody on the show last week, it's like, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Because I basically said, well, the president we have right now is only going to be here for like another 2 years. If he got a second term, he'd probably be here for 3-4 more years if he lives through a whole nother term. But if he doesn't, we're gonna have another president in play. Now ask yourself, 2 to 5 years from now, because he's either going to be here for 2 more years, and then we're probably going to have another president, maybe a Democrat, whatever. And then we have the understanding of, if once the current president's out of office, the volatility that we have in the market may die down. So what do you do over the next 2 to 5 years? Where do you want to be at in the next 2 to 5 years, right? Most people are like, oh, I want to be happy, I want to be free, from responsibility or whatever. Oh, I want to be healthy, vague future, vague future. You know, dude said, well, I want to, get me a truck and an RV, and I want to, travel the country. Vague future. Actually, a little bit more specific, but still a vague future. Because when you fundamentally say, well, I want to get me a truck, I want to grab me an RV, I want to travel the country. Well, you don't have an RV, so how much is an RV? You don't have the truck that you want. How much is the truck? He has a health issue that costs him $1,200 a month. You got to factor that into your RV truck scenario. Okay, and then because you're traveling, you're going to have a pickup location. Where is the medication being distributed in each state that you're going to be planning on going? Right. I mean, unless you're going to have a year supply in the back of the truck, right? Then and that medication needs to be, because that's like insulin style medication. That medication needs to be like refrigerated, so it's not like you're going to be able to say, oh well, I'll just put it in a briefcase and take it with me. No, you got to figure things out. So when you start talking about where you want to be at with your future, you have to really start pacing these things, because if you need a $30,000 truck to do the travel, you need to gauge for the $30,000 truck. You need a $50,000 RV, you need to gauge for that. You need $15,000 a year for your insulin, you need to gauge for that. Then you still got to talk about gas for the vehicle, insurance, your phone bill, and you're going to have to get a real phone line, because you can't just get a minute phone. Because what happens if you run out of minutes? You're going to need food, all of these other things. You got to factor all that stuff in. So just painting the picture that I'm going to retire, I'm going to live off the land and travel the country, you have to have a budget for that. It ain't cheap. Just a truck RV scenario might be $100,000, including the medication. And that means that between now and the time that you retire, you have to build up that quantity of money, right? And if you're traveling the country, you're spending $15,000 a year driving around. You got that. Now you're looking at 125,000 a year, and then when you start talking about food, you're looking at $150,000 a year. So as things start progressing, when you start making your plans, you really start thinking to yourself, well, shit, this is what I need to get to my goal. You don't have to be $1 million person by the time you retire, but you can figure it out as to where you want to be at in your life. Oh God, here he goes with those crappy CDL licenses. So he says, "See America for free and get paid. Get your CDL license." No, Michael, that's not the same. So if you're trying to find you a job, and you're trying to travel the country at the same time, you could be a flight attendant, you could be a pilot, you could get a CDL license and drive the country. But when we talk about retiring, we talk about you're not working. We're talking about you don't have the responsibility to be at a specific location by a specific time. That's not the same. If you retire and then get a CDL license, and then you start driving the country, now you have the responsibility to get in the company truck and drive the company product from point A to point B in a specific period of time, which is not retirement. It is not a vacation. Okay, so that's a bad idea for retirement. If you're going to quit working now, if you're just going to change jobs, if you're just trying to find another way to make money, then because you're probably a retired trucker, this is the first thing that you would tell somebody as a go-to, is to get a license and drive. But there's a lot of mental stress going on with that, and with the laws that are changing right now, and then they're capable of transitioning to driverless trucks. You're not guaranteed a job. While they do need drivers, they don't need that many drivers. You know what I mean? Because it's not like they're paying the drivers that are on the road shit tons of money. The only reason why you're making so much money as a driver is because you're living off of living out of a truck and camping out in hotels when you're not on the road, where you're spending the majority of your time on the road, right? And you probably stop off at a hotel like once a week, something like that. So the fact that when you only stop off at the hotel like every now and again to get it to take a shower, and you spend most of the time sleeping in the truck, you're spending your money on food, but you're not spending $5,000 a month on a place to stay. You probably spend like probably between, if you're getting the cheapest places to crash, you're probably spending $50 to $100 a night in a hotel, and you're probably only staying in the hotel probably 4 nights out of the month because most of the time you're sleeping in the back of the truck, right? He said, "Oh, I thought we were still working." Well, why would you still be working when we say retirement? I was talking about building your 20 and 30-year plan, and your 20 and 30-year plan is where you're going to end up and what you plan on doing for your life when you stop working, when you stop having to show up, where your money is making money for you, where you're getting paid without having to apply yourself, where you can travel the world if you want to, you can travel the country if you want to, you know, and what would you have to do to accomplish that? So yeah, if you want to travel the world now or travel the country now and be a trucker to do it and build up your wealth and then take the money off of being, you can be a trucker for 20 years and then put all that extra money into high end brokerage accounts and build you the kind of wealth where you can uh, 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 live off of that money, buy you a house, and settle down because you're going to be tired of traveling. One of the things that people don't understand is that what you do for work, you're not going to want to do that when you're not working. So, I mean, if you're a cook or a dishwasher, you're not going to really like, especially if you're doing it in a high pressure situation, you're not going to like wanting to do that as a retirement scenario. Because I don't know, we're wealthy already. Oh, well, we're not specifically wealthy already. This is talking about if you okay, from where you are in life today, what do you need to do to get to where you want to be at for retirement for those who are not already retired? You're 71 years old, you're probably already retired, so you don't understand the dynamic. But individuals who are working every day right now for the sake of sustainable living, planning to stop that, where do you draw the line? Where do you put your 2 week notice in? Where do you clock out for the last time? Where do you unstrap your bootstraps and leave your wrestling gear in the ring? When do you quit? Right? That's the question. And the answer to that question is that when you've met the requirements for the standard of living that you want when you retire. So now you have to figure out what the standards are for your retirement. What lifestyle do you want to have? Do you want to live in the same environment that you've been living in? Do you want to live in a better environment? Do you want to go to a new location? Do you want to go to a new country? Who all do you want around you? Are they going to be under the same income you're going to be under? All of these questions need to be answered. What hobbies are you going to be paying for? What recreational things are you going to be paying for? Are you just going to be in a room all day long watching TV, watching reruns? Or are you going to be entertaining yourself with dining out and outdoor activities, or at least outside of your house activities? These are things that you have to ask yourself. And once you decide what kind of lifestyle you want to have, then you can calculate what kind of budget it reasonably would cost today and maybe add a little bit of inflation to the cost for the next 20 years so that you can calculate what it might look like in 20 years for that type of lifestyle. If you have an $80,000 a year lifestyle in mind, you're likely going to need $880,000 to get it done in 20 years. If you're going to live off of the principle where you have a revolving $80,000 a year income, right? That's the kind of stuff that we think about. So you can figure out what your number is, because then once you figure out what your number is, now the question is, well, how long do I have to pay for that, or what do I got to do to get that quantity of money? Because as we were talking about with health insurance policies the other day, he said, "What's wrong with the bed in the truck?" Well, there's all kinds of stuff wrong with the bed in the truck because one, you're being paid to go to work and you're supposed to be retired. So two, you're not supposed to be in the back of a rig if that's not your dream to retire and live in the back of a rig. Okay, the easy answer, anything like not having to work. Right. So defining not having to work. That's what we were doing when you jumped in with get a CDO license. That's like saying, okay, I don't want to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 20 years in college so that I can be a doctor so that I don't have to work. Bro, you're going to be fucking working. You're going to be 18 hours a day, 6 days a week. You're going to be working. You're going to be on call. You know what I mean? Every time somebody falls out near you, is there a doctor in the house? Now you got to go to work. And then you got to follow the patient to the damn hospital. If you don't hand them off to the doctor there, you're going to have to do the work your damn self. Now, you're always got to work. So when we start talking about what do you have to do to stop working, you have to really figure that part out, and you have to map that. You know what I mean? If hobbies like what you have, which is going to estate sales and thrift stores and auctions and buying things with your discretionary spending, which helps with the dopamine hit for impulse buying, and then after you get tired of looking at it, selling it back online and making more money off of it than what you paid to get it. That type of hobby is what you do when you're retired, but you're doing that in a retirement where your standard of living is over covered so that the money that you're getting can cover the discretionary spending without hurting your budget. So your utilities, your mortgage, your rent, your car notes, your car insurance, your phone bills, your food, all of your medical bills, your doctor's appointment, all that stuff is covered first. And then the extra money you got left over, you go somewhere, oh, that looks nice, buy it. And then, all right, I'm tired of it, sell it and make you extra money. So you can still, even with that type of lifestyle, the fundamental core basis, how do I cover that? That's the question that you have to ask for those people who aren't already established. And that's what we talk about on a regular basis is how to get yourself established. Now, if you're already in the retirement age, you've already settled into the income that's coming in, you might have you some VA benefits, some social security, disability benefits, all this other stuff coming in. You've already established a lifestyle under the fixed income that you have, including have medical coverage and all this other stuff. You don't have to worry about where your money's coming from. All you need to do is exist. But for everybody else who doesn't have the VA benefits, who doesn't have the Social Security disability benefits, who doesn't have the benefit to get government funds to sustain their standard of living at 30 years old, 20 years old, 55 years old. We need to figure out what we're going to do to have a revolving income to keep us sustained. And that is what we're talking about when we talk about a 20 or 30-year term plan, right? Because the biggest problem people will have when renting is all the extra time that is used to filled with work. Oh, with retiring. Well, yes, yes. When you get up every day and leave the house every day and you find yourself grinding every day and that's been your life for the last 40, 50 years, 60 years. When you retire, where you have nothing to do, you will have that problem that you don't know what to do with yourself. Men's identity, a lot of people, not just men, a lot of people's identity is their career. So when you don't have a career anymore, you are a shell of yourself. And that comes with a lot of psychological and emotional issues that you have to overcome. After the first 6 months of resting, because that's pretty much what a lot of people are going to do when you don't have to work anymore, you just stop trying for a while. Then you have to get up off your butt and find stuff to do. You might get bored. You might get tired of laying around the house. And all right, what am I going to do today? Right. And in that moment, you have to have the capital there to help you cover that expense. What hobby do you want to have? What entertainment do you want to entertain yourself with while you're awake? Right. So you gotta formulate a budget. And that's why we tell you guys the importance of a 20-year plan, but then give you guys the ins and outs of other ways to get to that 20-year plan. Now, as for today's topic, because I know a lot of people came over for that. What if I told you guys that while everyone else has been distracted by the headlines of disappearing money, because there's been a lot of headlines where I think some cats came and knocked off a bank for I think $200 million or something like that. It's real. It's happening. Bust a hole in the wall in one of the banks. The real changes to our bank system have been happening quietly in the background. And it's not about your money vanishing overnight. It's going to be about a new set of rules that could change how you access and control your money. Well, that's the plan. That's the question. That's the question that I asked you guys last week, and none of y'all had a plan. There are ways to get there. One way you can get there is by investing. One way you can get there is by automating small businesses that have reoccurring capital. One way you can get there is peer-to-peer lending. Another way you can get there is getting involved in real estate. There's a lot of ways that you can get there. You can do driving trucks. You can have a career or occupation that pays you more money than your standard of living, and then invest the larger quantity of profits from your career to a financial source that will generate revenue when you stop doing that career. You know, there's a lot of different ways to get there. But before you start figuring out how to get there, the question is, where is there in the first place? That's the question that I ask you guys that you don't have an answer to. Where is there? So when you ask me, like, how do we get to the other side? The other side of what? You know, when you have the starting line, the finish line, and the Grand Canyon in between, how do you get there? There isn't enough information between the two destinations in order for you to be able to articulate that. That's what planning is about. First, you have to understand what the end goal is. A diamond heist, the end goal is the diamonds. So we're not going in there for cash. They could have cash in the registers. If the registers pop open, we take that too, but we're going for the diamonds, right? So you got to understand, if you have an end goal, then you can plan on how to achieve that end goal. Trying to be president, that is the end goal, right? Trying to be the CEO of a company, that is an end goal. You know, just trying to be happy, that's not an end goal, that's a feeling. And something can trigger that feeling, whether you achieve your goal or not. Trying to be in good health, that's not an end goal. Trying to be good health is a status of physical condition that may or may not be impacted by the end goal. You know, trying to be financially free, that's not an end goal. That is the byproduct of your financial decision making skills. But if you don't have enough capital to balance the budget, you're not going to be financially free. So, how do you get to be financially free if you don't know what your budget's going to be? You don't know what your income is, you don't know what your output is. So when you ask me, how are you going to get there? First, you have to identify where is there. A compass will only tell you which direction is north. You have to compare which direction the compass is pointing versus which direction you want to go. I can only tell you which direction you can go, which is north, which you have to be able to tell me how far you're going to deviate from north to get to where you want to go. So imagine this. You go to make a large purchase, something you've saved up for, a car, down payment on a house, maybe just paying for a big home repair. You walk into your bank to move the money, and the transaction gets flagged, frozen. Suddenly, your own money is caught in a web of compliance checks that you didn't even know existed. The teller can't give you a straight answer, and you're left wondering if you've done something wrong. What the fuck happened to my money? This isn't a far fetched movie plot, guys. For a growing number of people, this is a new reality. It's all because of a wave of new banking rules designed to fight financial crime. But in the process, these new rules are creating a minefield for regular law abiding citizens. The stricter the laws are to control people who don't follow laws, the harder it is for the honest people to function. I keep saying, instead of creating such strict laws for the people who follow laws, you should create stricter punishments for the people who don't. Plain and simple. But the headlines are designed to scare you. The headlines are going to scream about your money being trapped, about the government watching every transaction that you make. They talked about a um, bank that's like FedNet or something like that. It's a federal uh, banking platform where all the money from the government goes through that platform and then goes to you. It bottlenecks into that company where the government gets to monitor all of your transactions. At this moment, it is exclusively with government contracts, government funding like Social Security, disability, veterans benefits, stimulus checks, tax returns, um, and a lot of the times because the government wants you to upload your money to the bank, uh, uh, to the government through a ACH transaction, digitizing your payments to the government for taxation, which is one of the reasons why I tell you guys you should have a completely separate bank account for your tax returns because they're going to be using that bank account to charge your account to get tax money from you, and they're going to be using that bank account to give you your money when they're going to give you your money. People only think about when they receive money from the government. They don't think about how the laws are changing to the magnitude where they may not be making that money much longer. We're also, I was just sitting over here covering the information just the other day. Um, I found out that there's a strong possibility that the full-time working hours might be adjusted. So I want to get the truth about that. I heard the rumor mill that it might change to 32 hours a week, is considered full-time, and the possibility of the rest of that being overtime, which would put more money in the average American's pocket if that were true. And I'm going to be covering if it is on next Monday's show and how that would impact our abilities to make, save, and invest money, and then, you know, kind of give you guys an idea as to what to do with the extra money if that is true. Because if instead of working 40 hours a week and then getting time and a half after 40, you'll be working 32 hours a week and getting time and a half after 32, which gives you an extra 8 hours a week of overtime, which is an extra 4 hours of pay every week. Um, if that law goes into effect, and it's an extra 4 hours of pay of untaxed pay every week. So that's even more money when you think about it like that. Now, um, while there's a kernel of truth buried in the fears that people are talking about, the narrative is very twisted, and that's something that we're going to be trying to bust today. They thrive on your confusion, but here's going to be the good news. Understanding these changes is the key to ensuring that your money remains your money, accessible and safe. Knowledge is going to be the armor that you're going to need to be successful. Okay, hold on a second. We've got Jason. Special shout out to Jason. He says, I know people who worked in retail for 20 years and they said they are cut off after 30 hours, so the company does not have to pay them insurance. Yeah, yeah. That would be another thing that we would have concerns about because a lot of companies that when they make the law that says, well, if you're a full-time worker, you're mandatorily required to get insurance covered from the company, right? But full-time workers typically requires people to be making more than 35 hours a week, right? So what some employers do, like Walmart, they will give you a mandatory 32 hours a week to make sure that you never make the 35 hours a week to make sure that they never have to pay for your health insurance. Now, while they'll still offer you the health insurance, you're considered part time. Then you don't get the benefits paid from them. You got to pay for it out of your own pocket. They'll do swing shifts where instead of you working full 8 to 10 hour shifts, they'll have you working 4 to 6 hour shifts. They'll have you working 4 hour, 6 hour shifts. They'll have you working 6 hour shifts 6 days a week, or six hour shifts 5 days a week where you cover your 30. And then if they need you extra time, they might have you hit that extra day and pick up 6 more hours, but they're not going to allow you to do full-time work enough weeks in a row to qualify for the benefit. If you only get into overtime once or twice a month, you don't qualify as a full-time employee, so they never give you the full-time benefits. They don't pay for your Cobra because you're a part-timer. That is also the scenario with companies that don't want to pay overtime. Instead of them allowing you to work your full schedule, they'll in the beginning of payroll, they'll call you in on your days off. They'll ask you to stay late when you're about to clock out and go home. And then when you start getting closer to 35, 40 hours of for the week, even though you might have the rest of the week available on the schedule, because you've gotten close to 40 hours so quickly, they start sending you home early. They'll tell you don't come into work for the rest of the weekend, enjoy your quote unquote extra days off, and they will stop you from getting your overtime, but they'll have you come in or they'll have you work your shift, but they'll send you home early every day to offset the days that you came in and stayed late, which ultimately rearranges your schedule, keeps you on call, but you don't make an extra dollar for helping them out. You know what I'm saying? It's a very unfair and unjust system, but that's the way the system is designed. A lot of companies are not like the companies that are in Asia, where the countries that are in Asia, they mandatorily pay you for the quantity of time that you're supposed to be there, and since they're contractually obligated, they'll instead of firing you and paying you all these benefits to stay home, they'll do some shit like put you in a room by yourself and have you spend 8 hours a day just doing nothing. You have no responsibilities. You have no no interactions with your peers. You're the outcast of the company. You sit in an office by yourself from the time you get to work to the time you get off from work, and they just pay you to stay at work and do nothing. And typically you might ride that wave for a little while, but those people who find themselves validated by performance will find themselves quitting the job because they don't benefit the company and they have nothing to do on the job. And once they lose meaning being at work, they typically just quit and sometimes find another job, but that prevents the company from paying them the quantity of entitlements that person would have been required to get. Retirement money benefits, like if you work there for a really long time, you forfeit that stuff. You forfeit your vacation pay, your stocks, your bonds, all of this other stuff. When you just walk away from the job, you leave everything on the table. So the money that they pay you to sit in the back room and do nothing until it's time to go home is way less money than they would have had to pay you if they negotiated your exit, right? Now in America, it's not like that. In America, the right to work states you show up and they fire you if your shoes don't have the color that they prefer. If your socks are mismatched, they don't have to like the way your hair looks and you don't have a job anymore. It is not about your work ethic. It's about everything around your work ethic. They can get rid of you because they don't like your attitude, but you can be the best performing person on the job. So at the end of the day, you have to pay attention to how the company is treating other people as well as how they're treating you, and then figure out how you're going to work yourself out of this unfavorable situation. But yeah, I've been on plenty of jobs where they will cap your hours just to prevent you from getting the full-time benefits that they have to offer. Some companies have stock options and other such stuff that's available to full-time employees, but to prevent from having to give that stuff out, they cap employees at certain quantities of hours. And as long as you don't know that you're entitled to certain stuff, you won't get it. So since nobody asks for more, nobody reads the paperwork when they sign because they just need a job and they're like, fuck that. I filled out the W-2, I filled out the W-4. When do I start working? Nobody cares what the guidelines are because the guidelines are not just sexual harassment rules, not how to run the register rules. It's what you're entitled to is in the guidelines of your hiring, the onboarding process. And if you didn't pay attention to that when you first got on a job, if you still got that same job, now's the time to go and do some digging into the back work of the public records of your employment to find out what your people in your position are entitled to. And then start tapping your boss on the shoulder saying, hey, for X number of months or X number of years, I've been entitled to this and I haven't gotten it. So when do I get it? With back pay, with interest, right? These are the issues that are not being addressed. But it's our fault that it's not being addressed because they don't have to do anything if we don't say anything. I know Sterling was saying last week to hold big business accountable. How you hold big business accountable is to make yourself knowledgeable and then take action on that knowledge. You can't get justice if you don't step up and fight for it in the appropriate fashion. Now, in tonight's show, we're going to cut through the fear of what everybody's talking about. We're not going to panic, we're going to prepare. This is going to be a situation where you get to navigate to the left to bypass what's happening on the right. We're going to break down exactly what's changing with the bank safety, cash reporting, and your financial privacy. We're going to expose some of the myths, clarify the facts, and give you a clear plan to navigate this new financial world with confidence. So, if you're tired of the scary headlines and you want a real story, you're in the right place. Make sure that you guys like, subscribe, and mash those reaction buttons as we get started. But before we get into the weeds of the reporting of the rules, let's tackle the biggest fear that these headlines have created: the idea that the money in your bank account could just vanish spontaneously, either through a bank failure or some government action. Now, this is a foundation of all the other anxiety. So let's build our own solid foundation of facts. The core message, the one to remember through this whole discussion, is this: your deposited money isn't just disappearing. The safety net that protect depositors in the United States are robust. The anxiety comes from a very real and hysterical place. We all have this collective memory of the Great Depression, black and white photos of desperate people outside failed banks, their life savings wiped out. And when the news talks about banking instability, that old fear gets triggered. People start to wonder, could that happen again? If my bank goes under, is my money gone forever? That's the vast majority of people. The hard answer to that question is going to be no. And the reason can be summed up to two acronyms: FDIC and NCUA. Okay, so let's start there. The FDIC is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and it was created in 1933, right after the Great Depression's bank runs, for one purpose: to restore and to maintain public confidence in the banking system. The NCUA, or National Credit Union Administration, does the same thing for credit unions. So here's how it's supposed to work: the FDIC insurance deposits at its member banks, and the NCUA's insurance deposits at its member credit unions. The standard insurance amount, that is about $250,000 per depositor per insured bank. So for each account ownership category, you're going to see this specific quantity of money, which is why I tell you, if you get one account with each bank, that's $250,000 of financial protection for each bank. Now, the wild part about it is that the money protects you. If something happens to the bank, your money is still accessible. Doesn't protect you that much when you get hit by fraud, where somebody's stealing money directly out of your bank account. They're supposed to protect your money, but they don't always do it. Now, as far as the money being there to protect the bank, what this means is that if you have an account with $150,000 in it at an FDIC insured bank, and that bank fails, the FDIC will give you your $150,000 back. That doesn't mean that the bank has $150,000 in it for you to come and withdraw at the drop of a hat. Now, let's be precise about this, because precision is our weapon against fear. When you hear that no depositor has ever lost a single penny, the full accurate statement is this: No depositor has ever lost a single penny of FDIC insured funds. Got to be specific. That's an incredibly powerful track record spanning nearly a century because you still lose money. You lose money on bad transactions, you lose money on scams. The bank doesn't cover the scam, but you yourself being out of money from that would not be out of money if your bank went under, if your bank got sold off, if like what happened in 2008, where there were a bunch of mergers going on. Your money is still there, your account is still accessible, right? So when a bank fails, the FDIC steps in, and often over a weekend, and they make sure either they sell the failed bank to a healthier bank, and that's where the mergers come from, or they pay the depositors directly, sending you your money back from your bank account. For most people, the transition is seamless. You may go to bed a customer of Bank A and wake up a customer of Bank B with full access to your money. Like when Wells Fargo had bought out, what was it? I can't remember the name of the bank. But there was, you had like Wells Fargo, Bank of America. You had, we got Truist out there now, which is a merger of two different banks. There was a Regions Bank. I'm trying to think of a small branch that got bought out by a larger branch that basically was owned by Wells Fargo. And once they took over, all of the services changed over, but the accounts were still accessible. So it's crucial to know that this protection does have its limits. The $250,000 cap is real. And in 2023, when some large banks had failed, the government took extraordinary measures to protect uninsured deposits above that limit to prevent a wider crisis. But those were special discretionary actions. So you can't count on that happening every single time. But most of us don't have $250,000 sitting anywhere to be protected by FDIC. So when you see headlines about a bank crisis, remember this context. The system is designed to handle these failures without depositors taking a hit. As long as their funds are within the insurance limits, the regulations that we're about to discuss today are not touching this fundamental protection. They are weakening the FDIC or the NCUA. So nothing's changing there. They're not gonna weaken that at all. Now, the fear mongers want you to confuse two separate issues: the safety of your deposits and the privacy of your transactions. Your insured deposits are safe. They're not going anywhere. The changes are happening in the realm of your privacy and reporting. The government isn't trying to take your money. It's trying to watch where it moves to. And that's going to be a critical distinction. So take a breath. The bedrock of your financial security is going to be solid. Now, let's let this scenario build a little bit on that and understand the new rules of the road. Now, this is going to be one rule that everyone has heard of, but it's also one of the most dangerously misunderstood concepts in personal finance, that $10,000 rule. It has been twisted into a financial boogeyman, leading people to make terrible and sometimes illegal decisions. The problem starts with the idea that any cash transaction over $10,000 is illegal or will automatically trigger a life ruining audit. This leads to that whispered advice from a well meaning but wrong friend. Need to deposit $15,000 in cash? Don't do it all at once. The bank will report it. Just make two deposits of $7,500 to stay under the radar. This advice is a recipe for disaster. Following it is how you turn a perfectly legal transaction into a federal offense. This is the trap of structuring. and it's a far greater danger than the report itself. So let's get to the facts. What is the $10,000 rule really? Now, it comes from the Bank Security Act, a law that's been around for decades. It requires banks to file a currency transaction report or a CTR for any cash transaction or related set of cash transactions over $10,000 in a single business day. Let's dissect that for a minute. Because I know that when I've gone to an ATM machine, I've split up my transactions and I'm like $800 here, $700 there, $500 there in the same day. Why? Because the ATM machine doesn't take more than $1,000. Not because I didn't want to put it all in there at once. But let's break this down a little bit. First, the currency transaction report. This is a report. This applies to the physical cash. It doesn't apply to checks or wire transfers or debit card transactions, just the cash. Second, it's a report. It's not a tax or an accusation. It's just a piece of data filed with FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. Millions of these are filed every year for perfectly legitimate reasons, and not a lot of people know that it's actually being done while they're making these transactions. It happens when you're buying a car, even if you finance it. It happens when you're making a house down payment, even if it's financed. It happens when a business owner deposits a weekend sales, even if it is a legitimate business that's registered and been existent for years. A CTR is a natural boring form that has no negative impact on your honest above board actions and transactions. So let's get that understood. Third, it's filed by the bank, not you. Your If you deposited your $12,000 in cash from selling your boat, the teller fills out the form and you go about your day. For 99.9% of people, that's the end of the story. Okay. So you could take $15,000 out of your bank and then you could put it in another bank. Like, for example, 50 Cent was doing a photo shoot. He took $3 million out of the bank, went to the photo shoot. They did a CTR on that. If he brought the $3 million back to the bank when the photo shoot was over, they did a CTR on that. So the paper trail shows that he removed the money from the bank account for whatever reason. And he likely would have to tell the bank exactly what he was doing with the money because, for laundering purposes, banks are very nosy about when you pull large quantities of money out of their possession. They want to know, well, why are you taking so much? Maybe we can offer you something else. One, because they don't want to give you the money, but two, maybe you're a criminal. So they ask a lot of detailed questions. Oh yeah, well, I got this gig that I got to do, and I want to use this as a prop. Why don't you use fake money? I don't want to. I want to do this. Okay, fine. Fill out the paperwork. We get you a transaction. Boom, 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 boom. Then when you're done with it, you bring it back. Okay, so I want to put it back. I don't need it anymore. It was for that, but now I'm putting it back. Right? So okay, good. Now, whatever feds was watching that $3 million move around knows that it left this morning and came back the next day. It was an honest scenario. Every dollar was accounted for, right? No crime committed. That's what the paperwork is about, right? The danger arises when you try to be clever and avoid this report. So when you intentionally break up a large cash transaction into smaller ones to fall below the $10,000 threshold, you're committing a crime called structuring. And the banks are specifically trained to look for it. So think about this from the perspective of a bank. A single deposit of $12,000 is normal, but a deposit of $9,500 on Monday, followed by another $9,500 on Wednesday, that looks like someone is trying to hide something. That pattern is a massive red flag. One of the things that we've heard about reporting your money, one, you're not supposed to use exact dollar figures. Like when you're filling out your taxes, you're not rounding to the nearest whole number, you're doing dollars and cents. And it's not the exact same dollars and cents. Repetitive transactions look suspicious. You would have did a whole lot better if you would have had $9,587 one time and then $9,238 another time, where it would have looked like two completely different transactions. People don't think about that. But the fact that it's not happening regularly, that's going to be the red flag. If you used to not make these kinds of deposits, the first time a $9,500 deposit hits, they might not say nothing. But a few days later in the same week, a $9,500 deposit hits, they're going to start reporting that to the government. Like, hey, this guy's doing multiple transactions in less than a week, or multiple transactions in less than a month. But even though you notice the $10,000 transaction in a day is the reporting rule, but you can likely see $10,000 being deposited in a month that doesn't look like regular occurring paychecks could still be reported because it doesn't look natural in the course of transactions on your bank account, right? So this is where cautionary tales from small business owners become so important. There are widely reported stories of restaurants or farmers, cash intensive businesses who have had their accounts frozen or even seized under suspicion of structuring. So imagine a restaurant owner who makes daily cash deposits. If those deposits consistently hover just under the $10,000 amount, the bank's automatic system might flag the account, even if the owner's intent wasn't to evade reporting. The pattern itself creates suspicion. So it's got to be irregular amounts, right? The bank, fearing penalties, might preemptively close the account and file a report, right? It's a nightmare scenario that starts not from the CTR itself, but from the misguided attempt to avoid it. Now, this brings us to a more potent tool the banks have, the Suspicious Activity Report, or SAR. Now, while a CTR is automatic and based on a dollar amount, a SAR is subjective and can be filed for any transaction of any amount that the bank just thinks is suspicious. So, what's suspicious? Anything outside your normal pattern. So, if you're usually depositing $2,000 at a time, and then you fuck around and start depositing $10,000 at a time, where the fuck did that other $8,000 come from? That's suspicious. You get a one-time transaction of $15,000 and then go back down to $2,500 at a time. That was an outlier. That outlier is suspicious, right? So a series of small cash deposits just below $10,000 is a classic example. Suddenly trying to wire money to a high-risk country. That's also a problem. Even your behavior, if you seem unusually nervous when you're going into the bank to make your transactions, or are very vague about the source of funds, which is where the money is coming from, or where the money is supposed to be going when they start asking you questions about your larger transactions. These can contribute to a SAR. If you're being honest, if what you're doing is legitimate, you should have no problem with telling them all the ins and outs of what you're about to do with this transaction and why. Right? And here's the kicker. The bank is legally prohibited from telling you that they filed a SAR on you. So they're never going to tell you that I got to file this report. because you're about to perform such a transaction. It is a secret report. So while you're trying to outsmart a simple CTR, you could be triggering a far more serious SAR report. In those cases, you might find your account frozen while the bank investigates everything you got going on. The solution is counterintuitive but simple. You got to be boring. You got to be very transparent about your money only with the bank. If you have a large, legitimate cash transaction, just do it. Walk into the bank, make the deposit. If the teller asks you where the money came from, tell them the truth. I sold a car. It's a small inheritance. Uh, we took this money with us to go out of town on vacation, and we just came back, and we didn't need the remainder, so we're putting it in the bank account. Tell them the truth. A simple logical explanation for legitimate activity is the best way to diffuse the suspicion. The real rule isn't avoid transactions over $10,000. The real rule is don't act like a criminal with the $10,000, because in today's banking world, trying to hide is the most suspicious activity of all. Now, we've talked about how multiple countries around the world with tax treaties with one another all have a global system of transparent reporting, at least for individual accounts, not necessarily for corporations. If transparency is the thing, you're not trying to be secretive with the people who hold your money. You're not trying to be secretive with the government that can seize your money. You don't want your money to be public record, but you don't want the institutions that you do business with to not trust you with the money that they're holding on your behalf. A lot of the times people say that certain things are none of your business. Keep everything close to the vest. But the person that you have to trust with your estate has to have the ins and outs details of your estate. Because if they don't trust you, they will shut down your operation. When you recruit somebody to middleman your situation, that person's involvement has to have the utmost confidence. Otherwise, that's the snitch. That's the person that shuts down the whole operation, right? So if the $10,000 cash rule is the old guard of financial surveillance, the Form 1099-K saga is the new digital frontier. And the confusion around it has been a masterclass in how a reporting change can be twisted into widespread panic. The problem was a ticking time bomb for millions of Americans using PayPal, Venmo, Zelle, and Cash App. The panic was fueled by virtual posts and scary headlines. The IRS is coming for your Venmo, or new $600 tax will hit everyone. People imagine getting a massive unexpected tax bill just for splitting a pizza with friends or paying their roommate for rent. The fear was that every digital transaction, no matter how personal, was about to become taxable income. That felt like a direct attack on your casual peer-to-peer economy. So many of us was relying on that. But the reality, far more nuanced. The solution is understanding what this rule is, what it isn't, and where it actually stands today after a series of confusing delays. All right. First, let's kill the biggest myth. The 1099-K rule is not a new tax. It's never been a new tax. You have always been legally required to pay income taxes on money that you earn, whether it's in cash, by check, or via Venmo. If you have a side hustle, that money has always been taxable income. The 1099-K rule doesn't change that. I've talked to you guys a lot of the times about the difference between paying taxes and filing taxes is that there's an obligation that they take the taxes out of your W-2. Um, they put up a tax bill for those who don't have taxes coming out of their W-2. So if you're 1099, you have taxable income that's been reported to the IRS. The IRS is like, hey, you owe you some money. Now, if you file, because there is a clear back and forth action where there's some sources say that you mandatorily have a requirement to file, and failure to file could lead to penalties, and audits and all of these other things. But then you turn around and you see people who haven't filed for 6, 7, 10 years. You have the president of the United States who's never filed. You have certain individuals who are able to not file because all of their assets run through a different entity that files under that entity, where their own personal money is there. It isn't personal money. It isn't anything to be filed, right? So the rule of thumb is this: the choice to file comes with the legal obligation to tell the truth when you file. The choice to not file, depending on the quantity of money that you're making, because after a little bit of research, while yes, it is possible for a reoccurring tax bill to stack against you, where the government wants you to give them money, like MC Hammer, for example. But MC Hammer had $53 million worth of taxable income, where only $800,000 was due. My boy could have gave him $1 million, and he would have been a $52 million man. It would have still been the hottest thing from the '90s till now, right? We still got folks willing to do the Hammer Man, right? Uh, he just didn't have it because he spent all of his money before he was spending it faster than it could come in, so he didn't have it when they asked for it, right? When they asked for the 800,000. Um, but broke folks, while yes, over the course of 10, 20 years of never filing and a tax bill accumulating, it would likely be a scenario where they might contact you and be like, hey, what's going on with your money? You know, but when you're making less than $200,000 a year of taxable income, the resources for them to come after you to make you start telling them what's going on costs more than them getting from you what they want to get from you. And the realistic foundation of this is the portions of the United States that makes us so free, even when you're not doing what you're supposed to do or doing what you're not supposed to do. If the people who are going to enforce it are unwilling to enforce it because they're lazy, because it costs too much money, whatever the case may be, it allows you to not have to do that. So it goes from being a mandatory requirement to being a choice and an option. The same way the draft was a mandatory situation since the last World War, and it's only been treated as an option for the last 60, 70 years, because the resources required to hold each person from the 50s all the way until now who didn't register for the draft to be court martialed would be extreme, because the majority of Americans didn't do it. I know I didn't do it. I didn't even know about it, you know. Um, but we weren't during war times when I was young. So you just end up not getting certain things, but you end up, being able to skip over that, because as soon as you have a situation that throws you in a disability scenario, special shout out to Uncommon Woman. Blessings, Xander, in the chat room. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. Once you end up getting that first injury and stuff to that effect, you stop qualifying for the military anyway, because the military doesn't take in disabled people. This isn't like the Olympics. You have to be the best of the best of the best. So if your physical condition doesn't support military service, even if you did sign up, they're probably not going to call you anyway, right? People didn't know that either. Back in the day when the draft was around, people used to cut off their foot or cut off their big toe and interfere with their ability to perform, self mutilation to interfere with their ability to perform, which would prevent them from being drafted or getting court martialed. But I'm not cutting off a big toe to keep from going to the to the army, right? Now, be that as it may, when it comes down to filing, again, if you don't, And let's say that you've got a W-2 job, they're taking money out of your check on a regular basis, you don't file taxes. Well, they keep your money. Now, they're less likely to tap you on the shoulder and talk about your finances when they're keeping your money, because if they have to give you money back because you don't make enough money, you not filing allows them to keep it. And there's a period of time where, yeah, they'll charge you a penalty on the amount of money that you would have owed, and then that penalty will circulate through the system until they it's eaten up all of your refund money. If you file late, what you would have gotten is going to be less because the refund money, the penalties, right? As long as they owe you money, you're less likely to be contacted by the IRS. As long as you owe them money and nothing's coming in to wash that away, you're more likely to get contacted by the IRS. That's the understanding, right? Now, the people who are getting tax evasion, the people who are going to jail for tax fraud, those are people who are under reporting their finances. They're literally lying to the government. When Little Kim went to jail for tax evasion, that wasn't because she didn't file taxes. It's because whoever filed taxes on her behalf lied about how much she had and how much she was supposed to get taxed on. That's what it was. She didn't claim everything that should have been claimed, and her amount was not the amount that they sent to her because it was misrepresented. That's what tax evasion is. That's what tax fraud is. It's lying about it. Failure to file. That's a different scenario. You're not lying about your assets. You're just not talking to them about it, which is a different scenario. Not necessarily saying that they're not going to come and get you for that, and not necessarily saying that that's not a crime, and to some respects. But the difference between every time you file, they can audit that, meaning they go back 5 or 10 years from the date of filing and dig into your history. And I think they have up to 7 to 10 years on that income. So here in 2026, your finances from 2016, they're not looking at that. We're going into 2027 right now. They're going back to 2017. So your finances from 2016, they're not looking at that. If there's a history of fraud, they might go back 20 years. They might go back longer than that if there's a history of fraud. But just for the sake of what the fuck happened with your money over the last few years, they're only going back like 7 to 10. So if you hadn't filed in the last 15 years, I mean, whatever was supposed to happen in 2015, that's not on the books, right? So let's pay attention to that. But what changes is the reporting of the income, because Form 1099-K is a form that payment platforms send to you and the IRS, reporting the gross amount of payments you receive. The goal is to close the tax gap, the difference between taxes owed and taxes paid, by making it harder to underreport your income, right? The source of the panic was a provision in the American Rescue Plan of 2021. For years, the reporting threshold was high. You'd only get a 1099-K if you had over 200 transactions and more than $20,000 in payments. The new law was set to drop that threshold to just $600. So with no transaction minimum and $600, if you're passing money back and forth with friends, the app might send to the government that you're getting shit tons of money from other individuals. This is what caused the chaos. Suddenly, anyone who sold a few old things on eBay for more than $600, or a freelancer who did a single small gig, would get this official tax form. The bigger fear was that personal transactions, like getting paid back for concert tickets, would get swept up in the total. making it look like you had income that you didn't. And that fear was legitimate. The platforms often can't tell if you're selling and using, if you're selling a used couch or getting reimbursed for groceries. This puts the burden on you to prove which transactions were non taxable. For example, some apps ask you, is this a business transaction or is this a gift? Peer-to-peer loans or lending and stuff to that effect. Most of us who try to avoid the transaction fees will select the option that doesn't charge us transaction fees. Okay, but now if this was a gift to somebody else, there's a gift tax. Now, if somebody's receiving thousands of dollars from a friend as a gift, there's a gift tax. So now that person's got to prove that wasn't a gift, that was a reimbursement. You have in these transactions like Zelle and other such things where there's an optional memo section. What's the money for? If you fill in that blank, reimbursed for groceries, money for the light bill, money for the gas bill, utility payments, that's notated on the app in your transactions, where it's a declaration from you, a manual declaration from you of what this money is going to the other entity for. Now, when they draft the documents and start reporting, these memos are going to be in the paperwork. Okay. Now, that helps because now we know where the money went and what it went there for. On the flip side, the person who's receiving it, if you're receiving this for certain transactions, it's easier for you to show that it went towards that transaction, which allows for them to be able to cover the spread between the two a whole lot easier. However, the rollout has been a mess, which has temporarily worked in the favor of taxpayers. The IRS, recognizing the massive confusion, has repeatedly delayed full enforcement of the $600 threshold. So, getting a timeline straight, the $600 rule was supposed to start for the 2022 tax year. IRS delayed it. It was then supposed to start for the 2023 year. They delayed it again. And for the 2024 year, the IRS announced a phase-in approach, setting the temporary threshold of $5,000. And as for the 2026 year and beyond, while the $600 threshold is still technically the law, the IRS has not yet announced when or if it will begin enforcing it, and further guidance is still pending. But they did bring the price down from 20 grand down to $5,000 to be able to mitigate the situation. So while further guidance is still pending, anyone that's telling you that a specific rule for 2025 is set in stone, it's getting ahead of the facts. There are laws that are in place that are not being enforced. Just like I talked to you guys about the cars with the monitoring vitals and reporting all of this data to the law enforcement and getting you tickets and shit. That stuff was put into action in 2021 on paper, not in practice. It's 2026, 5 years later. It still does not exist. But allegedly, they're supposed to start having it in the new rollout of the 2027 models. Technically, 2027 models are supposed to start being released this summer. Or, well, not released, but shipped this summer to be released this fall, where, October, November, December, get your 2027 X, Y, and Z, right? It's supposed to be there. Not necessarily going to be there. It might be there quarter one shipments of 2027 during tax season, but these features that are in a lot of these vehicles are likely to not be in your favor in addition to the $10,000 to $15,000 increase surplus that's being added to the price of the vehicles because of the tariffs. I've been telling y'all forever, I'm buying old ass cars. Then, oh, there's another thing about these cars. They have this E15, which is ethanol 15, that is destroying the older model cars. It's becoming a thing. There's about 1,000 stations in the country right now, so not a lot. They should reach about 5,000 stations across the country out of about 150,000 stations across the country that are starting to have the ethanol 15s. Your car runs off of ethanol 10. Ethanol 15 will destroy your car for any model that's made before 2001, and it would heavily damage your vehicle for any vehicle made after 2001. You want to find either ethanol 10%, which is E10, or you're looking for ethanol free, which costs more money than ethanol. Ethanol free is going to cost more than premium gas, but ethanol free would be the best gas to use for your antique 1963 whatever or your 1974 whatever. And when you start dealing with this new knowledge that E15 fuel is going to be widely spread if you're not operating diesels, you're going to want to stockpile the ethanol free gas at your house. And then that goes back to us talking about storing those 40-gallon gas cans on your property and then pumping your gas into your car with your when you need gas instead of having to chase down that ethanol based gas station scenario, right? Now, uh as for the money, what does the 1099K mean for you right now? Well, first, you can breathe a little bit. The tidal wave of 1099Ks has been held back. Second, this is going to be a wake up call to get your financial house in order. Don't wait for the government. The solution is proactive record keeping. So if you use any platforms that are supposed to issue 1099Ks for money received, uh, especially if it's a mix of business and personal transactions, get organized now, right? So here's what you're going to do. Use separate accounts. That's going to be one of the best things that you can do. The cleanest solution is to have a separate Venmo or PayPal account just for your business. That way, if you get a 1099K for that account, the number will actually be your gross revenue. Now, a lot of people are listening to those gurus about wealth advice where you phase in personal expenses into your business. One of the ways that that actually effectively works is if your company credit card pays for personal expenses, and then the company capital pays for the company credit card, where the credit card itself isn't under the auditing scenario. It should be, but it's not under the auditing scenario when you're following your taxes. You're saying, hey, this is how much money I made. This is what I spent my money on. So if credit card payments was what I spent my money on, the itemized credit cards is not necessary unless you're in an audit, right? Um, Another thing that they do when they say that you incorporate your personal discretionary spending into business expenses is you try to do things as a part of work so that you can get your per diem or reimbursement credits for doing it through the job as a job. This only happens when you actually have a legitimate business that's making money and it can be charged to the company's expenses. Other ways is like borrowing large quantities of money, putting it up against assets, and then covering the spread there. Where ultimately the company is paying for the house, the car, the phone bill, all of the other utilities, and the only thing that you really need money for is food and clothing, right? Because transportation and everything else is paid for. But when you think about The structure, you think about the fact that every business meeting is going to be either breakfast, lunch, or dinner. So your food is covered from per diems from the job. Um, Vacations or business trips, so that's covered from the job. So really, the only thing that's not covered by the job is, oh wait, work uniform. So personal leisure clothes probably not covered, but work uniform, your business outfit, that's going to be covered. So that's where they go with that. But normally, like hanging out with friends, clubbing, this, that, and the third, party time, that's separate expenses from a standard overhead. You want to split your money up because one of the things that people don't pay attention to is that your LLC, C corporation, that's supposed to be a standalone entity, if it's intertwined with your personal life and you're the head of the company and you're a beneficiary of the income, they typically consider that your personal income. So that kind of graze the areas of your taxable income and makes it a little bit harder for you to be separate from your business. Where if you receive exclusively a personal lawsuit, your business would be exposed to it as well because you intertwine your personal life with your business life. So if you keep them separate, you're less likely to be impacted by that, which allows for the two entities to run separately so that something that happens to one doesn't impact the other, right? But if you're using friends and family correctly, when you're making a personal payment, reimbursing a friend, sending a gift, use the feature for that. Payments for goods and services are the ones counted towards the 1099K threshold, which those of us who are trying to skirt the system and not pay the transaction fees are probably going to list everything as friends and family gifts and stuff to that effect. But that could actually negatively impact, is that an income or is it not an income? So using the right category helps classify payments correctly, even if you have to pay the fee in order to calculate that stuff correctly. Keeping a good note in the memo line is a very good way to do it. You got to be specific, just like I said. Instead of just giving them a thanks, write reimbursement for dinner 620 or June 2026 rent share, something like that. If you do get a 1099K with personal payments on it, these notes are your proof for the IRS. The 1099K saga isn't about a new tax, it's about the digitization of the financial tracking that they're doing. So the government wants visibility into the billions flowing through these apps. The direction is going to be clear: more reporting, not less reporting, more transparency, not secrecy. The solution isn't to stop using these tools, it's to use them smartly and keep the records to prove your money is, in fact, your money and involved in legal transactions. So, for those of you that like to, you know, call your street pharmacist and have them provide you with some recreational entertainment, you might have to word it something else, but you itemize the transaction as a specific transaction. So you Venmo your boy 124 and 0, you're not going to put, picked up an ounce. You might say reimbursement for groceries. You might say reimbursement for gas. You might say reimbursement for light bill. But you're going to itemize it so that it is counted as a reimbursement, not as a payment, which prevents the IRS from saying, hey, one of y'all needs to be taxed. Y'all think Cash App is supposed to slide and it's, oh, it's nobody's gonna know, blah, 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 blah. No, Cash App just ain't sent y'all no damn 1099s because they don't have to yet. Now, we're about to get into some of the biggest shifts in financial privacy that has happened in decades. So I want to make sure that you guys continue to mash those reaction buttons as we're going along. Um, a law that affects millions of small businesses, yet most have never heard of it. If you're finding the breakthrough of all of this information that I'm breaking down for you very valuable, I want you guys to take a moment. And if you haven't already hit that subscription button, you do so. I want you guys to support us and help us cut through the algorithm so that everybody else can pay attention to the facts and the truth, because we actually found some pretty decent stuff this year that if I wasn't talking about it, we wouldn't know about it. So if the previous rules were tremors, the Corporate Transparency Act is going to be an earthquake. And this one is one of the most significant pieces of the financial regulation in a generation. And it's happening almost entirely under the public's radar. It fundamentally changes the nature of privacy for small business owners. The problem is that this law, which went into effect in 2024, directly impacted the estimated 32 million small businesses, and a shocking number of their owners have no idea that it exists. The anxiety comes from the law's language, which sounds both invasive and menacing. Talking about beneficial ownership requires you to report information to a federal database run by FinCEN and carries severe penalties for not complying, including hefty fines and even prison time. So naturally, anyone who hears about that is going to get worried. Is the government creating a massive registry for business owners? What will they do with the data? Is this the end of financial privacy for entrepreneurs? The solution is calmly dissect the law, understand its purpose, and know exactly what to do about it. Um, what is the Corporate Transparency Act? At its core, the CTA is an anti money laundering law. For decades, the United States was one of the easiest places in the world to farm an anonymous shell corporation. Criminals and kleptocrats used these anonymous companies to launder money, evade taxes, and finance illicit activities. The CTA is Congress's attempt to pull back that veil. Now, the law requires many companies, including most LLCs and corporations, to file a report with FinCEN disclosing information about their beneficial owners. A beneficial owner is anyone who either exercises substantial control over the company or owns at least 25% of it. Substantial control is broad, but it includes senior officers like CEOs and people who can appoint or remove officers and key decision makers. So for each beneficial owner, the company has to report their full legal name, date of birth, address, and an ID number from a driver's license or passport, including an image of that document. Now, this is a massive change from corporate anonymity to corporate transparency. So let's address the confusion. In early 2024, a federal court in Alabama ruled the CTA unconstitutional. And this led many to believe that the law was dead. This is a dangerous misconception. The court's order applies only to the specific plaintiffs in that case, the National Small Business Association and its members at that time. So, for the vast majority of companies, the CTA is still the law and you still have to file it. Now, another dangerous rumor is that the law only applies to foreign companies. That's completely false. It applies to most domestic United States entities as well. So, who has to file? Well, most small businesses that are farmed by filing a document with the Secretary of State, like LLCs and C corporations. There are 23 exemptions, but they are mostly for large, already heavily regulated companies like banks and public companies. So if you started a side hustle with a new LLC, you are most certainly a reporting company. Now, one thing really, what I want to make clear real quick before we get into this, tiptoeing back to um, the $10,000 money laundering thing. Recent reports have shown that in certain zip codes in states like California and Texas, they have now changed the reporting law from the $10,000 threshold down to $200. So Whenever you're making a transaction, and we might cover more of this later, but I want to make sure that I cover some of it now, just in case some of you guys have to go. Um, Whenever you're depositing cash money into the bank, so this isn't like wire transfers and checks and ACH payments. This is cash money over the amount of $200 in California and Texas. You are likely to experience that CTR report or a SARS report. This is to further limit, restrict, or minimize money laundering activities. As we're getting into this part of the show, there is another portion of the Criminal Reporting Act that has become a thing when you are buying real estate cash up front, be it a person, be it a company, be it a trust. Buying a cash up front property requires them to troll through every layer of protection and find the human beneficial entities of that trust. So if you've got an LLC that's owned by a trust, with a trust as a beneficiary, with a trust as a beneficiary of that one, with a trust as a beneficiary of that one, and you're the beneficiary of the fourth trust, if the LLC bought the house cash up front, they have to find the person that benefits from that. So while on public record, the property belongs to such and such LLC, and such LLC is owned by ABC Trust. And the situation might die there as far as public records because ownership doesn't list beneficiaries, right? Beyond that, as far as public records are concerned, the feds still knows who bought the house cash up front. Now, if you're trying to bypass that, which it's not really a bypass, this is for cash upfront purchases in real estate. If you are buying a property with a mortgage, which typically ties, and this is the funny thing about this, because it's not a loophole to the situation, it's just direct ownership responsibility. The person who's responsible for the mortgage is the person that's responsible for the purchase of the property. The person who represents the LLC, the person who represents the C corporation, the person who represents the trust, the trustee of the trust. It identifies somebody who's attached to the mortgage. You can still transfer the property into a trust after the fact so that you're off the books. And the mortgage is tied to the property. You can pay the mortgage off shortly after the mortgage is established. There isn't a penalty for that, right? But somebody is going to be responsible. So it's not just going to be a cash purchase to an unknown entity. It's going to be a purchase to a specific individual, even if for public record it is not listed to a specific individual. So if you're trying to avoid that SARS report, or if you're trying to avoid that CTR report, mortgage the property and then pay off the mortgage. Even if you got the cash up front, mortgage the property and then pay off the mortgage. Now, if you don't give a shit about the CTR report or the SAR report because you're not doing anything wrong, you buy the house cash up front. Just know that even if you put it in your name or you put it in your business's name or you put it in your trust name, they're going to find who all the beneficiaries are of that property. And you will be listed in a database in the feds on that property. Which irony, if you're involved in something and the feds decides to seize your assets, all those assets that you're a beneficiary of, gone. So I just want you to understand that. If you didn't think about it before, you got to think about it now. So here's going to be your actionable advice on this. Determine your deadlines. Companies that are created before January of 2024 have until January 2025 to file, and companies created during 2024 have 90 days from formation. Companies created in 2025 and beyond have 30 days to file, and these deadlines are firm. You will have some kind of penalty to pay. Sometimes your $125 or $250 filing might end up being $400 or $500 because of late fees and penalties because you didn't file on time. It's the penalty for late filing is in fact a specific penalty, but that penalty is not going to be compounding interest to my knowledge at this time. So if you fail to file in 2022 and your business still exists and you forgot about it or you just didn't have enough money to pay for it, you have to refile and get a you have to refile and get a and pay the penalty for that. So if you look at how much it costs to refile, until you refile, there's some issues with the status of the business. But if and when you do refile, you're gonna have to pay that surplus. It's gonna cost more money to refile after letting it lapse than what it would have cost to pay it regularly. But if you haven't paid it in 2 or 3 years, it kind of washes itself out. You might pay that penalty, but after you pay that penalty, it's like that kind of is like 2 years worth of payments. I only paid it for the first time this year, kind of situation. So you want to go to the source. Don't use a third party service that emails you asking for the money. You don't want to do that because that'll draw you into a scam. The only place to file is directly on the FinCEN BOI e-filing websites, which is I'm going to put this email on the screen for you guys so that you can take a look at this if you have a business, an LLC or something like that. And if y'all go here, if you have if you got a small mom and pop shop, if you got your little hair salon, if you got your little barber shop or whatever the case may be, where you got a little something going, it ain't nothing big time, but you want to make sure that your situation is legit. So if you go to the e-filing website, uh, bioefiling.fincen.gov. It's a free website. You put your information in there and make sure that your company is legitimately covered with the government. You can go in there and get all before you send them anything. You can pull off all the information off the website and find out exactly what you got to do with the government, and then cross-reference it with other websites that are government websites to make sure that the information that you're getting is 100% satisfactory to your ability to file, and then you submit the documents. You can get a customer service number from there, call somebody, talk to a live agent so that they can tell you what you need to do. You can even contact the IRS and you can find out from them if this particular situation is something that you're qualified to be involved in. Because if you're not reporting correctly, your business is not as legitimate as you think it is. And that could cause issues when you start trying to get funding, especially when you start trying to get government funding. You want to gather your information before you start. You want to make sure that you have the required personal information for your beneficial owners of the company. And then consider a FinCEN identifier because an individual can apply for a FinCEN identifier, which is a unique number that can be used on future BOI reports instead of re-entering all of that personal details on a regular basis. Everything they do, they try to automate it. You can store that number in your files, and when it's time for you to do your annual reports, you can simply submit that number and it kind of just copy and paste all the information from before, since the entity is not adding and removing new people on a regular basis. But you want to remember to update it. This is not a one-time, one-and-done filing kind of situation. If any reported information changes, like an owner moves or you bring on new partners, you have 30 days to file an updated report. The CTA is a paradigm shift that we have to adapt to. It's inconvenient and it feels invasive, but it is the law, and the goal is to make it impossible for the worst actors to hide. So for the legitimate small business owners, it's a new serious compliance hurdle, but it is one that can be cleared with awareness and prompt actions. Ignoring it is not an option. It can lead to complications down the line. And for decades, if you wanted to make dirty money disappear and reappear as a stable asset, there was no better place than the United States real estate market, which is what we just finished talking about. Buying a multi-million-dollar property using an anonymous shell company and an all-cash deal was the ultimate money laundering loophole. And this allowed dictators and criminals to park their ill-gotten gains in Miami condos and Manhattan penthouses, driving up prices for everyone else. People are rightly outraged by the idea that our cities are becoming piggy banks for the world's crooks, while regular families are outpriced. Now, the solution has been evolving for years. Benson has used a targeted tool called Geographic Targeting Order, or GTO, not the car. So these GTOs require title insurance companies in high risk areas like New York City, Miami, and Louisiana to report the true owners behind shell companies making all cash real estate purchases above a certain price level. Now, the price level isn't specific, but you can guaranteedly understand that multi-million dollar properties are going to be on this list. Rehab houses that are like 50 to $100,000 might be on a list, but less likely. She laughing. Yes, ma'am. This is a this is one of those things that we have to pay close attention to. So they're going to be trying to uh they're going to be trying to make sure that nobody's running off with ill-gotten gains. So the GTOs are likely surgical strikes. So they were effective, but criminals could just move their operations to a city not covered by a GTO, right? Now, a bigger shift is on the horizon, but we have to separate facts from proposals. So you might see content claiming that a new nationwide rule is already in effect, where as of mid 2026, the reality is that FinCEN is in the process of creating a new nationwide rule that would make the GTO program permanent and extended in all 50 states across the country. Now, the rulemaking process is ongoing, so the final details are still being hammered out, and it has not become official across all 50 states that the GTOs, the rules, not the car, is going into full effect. But the direction is crystal clear that a national reporting system is coming. The proposed rule is aimed squarely at the biggest blind spots, which is non financed transfers of real estate. So if you have transfers of real estate that are financed by a third party, be it FHA, a regular private lender, hard money, whatever, if it's financed by somebody, it's less likely to be added to this list. So when you get a mortgage, the bank vets you for the bill. Who are you? What are you doing? Where's your money coming from? They make sure that you're somewhat legit on paper. Even when they have a third party broker vet you. The new rules aim to create similar transparency for the transactions that don't involve a bank. The government wants to know who is really buying the property. Does this mean the era of anonymous all cash real estate purchases is officially over? Maybe not over, but it is on a life support. This makes the process much harder and more likely to leave a paper trail back to the true owner, which ultimately gives the ability to hold somebody liable. Now, the extent of all cash purchases might have the first person that bought the property on the books. But if that person transfers the property somewhere else, there isn't a paper trail for that part. Not yet, at least. So, again, remember I told you guys earlier on in the show that if you got a fall guy, you and the fall guy have to have full trust and honesty with one another. Their role, to the magnitude that you're going to be utilizing them, is to perform a certain way. Something happens, they're in the spotlight. Everything else is outside of the realm of the investigation unless they snitch. So you've got to keep them in a comfortable position where they've got nothing to say. All right. So you buy a house. And what if you were that person that they paid you 1% of the property, 1% of the cost of the property to buy the property? And you buy the property. You got paid to buy the property. You're not a criminal. You don't have a felony record. And you take the property, you put the property into a trust. A transfer of title is not going to trigger the GTO. The all cash sale will. If you're buying a bunch of properties but you don't have a job, they're going to investigate you. If you have a real estate investment trust, or not a real estate investment trust, a real estate investment LLC under your name, and you're buying properties with investment capital, you know, they're going to want to dig into your business and find out where the money came from. But to the magnitude of, you started with, let's say, a cash loan, and that cash loan could come from a third party entity that's a faceless entity. You borrow cash from somewhere, now you're buying properties and you're putting them into the trust. They're not going to do too much digging after that, as long as they know who was responsible for the cash purchase. Now, I'm not telling you this is how to get around the system. I'm telling you that guy's the fall guy, because that guy bought the property. If they find that the capital that was used to buy the property is linked to criminal activity, the person that bought the property is going to be an accomplice. I'm just gonna throw it out there. He's gonna be part of the situation because you bought the property with ill-gotten funds, right? So you got to be careful where you get your money from, and you got to be careful with what you're putting the money towards. So for those who think that they can outsmart this complex legal structure, you guys got to think again. The whole point of beneficial ownership reporting is to look through those structures and make sure that legitimate entities are owning these properties for legitimate reasons. The intent of these rules is to force filers to trace ownership back through every layer of LLCs and the trust until they identify the real human being who ultimately owns the asset. The system is being built to demand the names behind the curtain. The real estate push combined with the Corporate Transparency Act is a two-pronged attack on anonymous entities. The CTA requires the companies to report who owns them, and the new real estate rule will require professionals in that transaction to report who the buyers are. Now, there is a situation here that I haven't mentioned yet. The details of who the trust is and who the beneficiaries are is laws, rules, and regulations for American trusts and LLCs and all of this other stuff. So if you have a Cayman Islands LLC with a Switzerland trust, probably not going to get as much information. It's going to be owned by an offshore company that is operated by an overseas trust. The beneficiaries of that one is probably not going to be as easily accessible as if you have an American trust or an American LLC with an American C corporation that is inside of the American law. They can dismantle that one. Now, when you start making enough money to go to other countries, because remember, I told you guys that trusts overseas have a minimum of $250,000 worth of assets, and they're going to be charging you a 1 to 2% annual fee to handle your money. You would have to establish, and because 1 to 2%, what's that, like $25,000 for $250,000? No, that's 10%. So $2,500, something like that, somewhere between $25,000 and $2,500 for $25,000 $250,000 worth of money. If you had $250,000, you're going to be paying a decent quantity of money. So let's just assume that they're going to charge you like, you know, 20, 2,500 or $25,000 for your $250,000 in the bank. Let's say that they're going to do that. Your $250,000 portfolio would have to generate $250,000 worth of profits in order to pay the salary of the trustee. Okay, so that you can break even. If you're trying to turn a profit, you have to put it somewhere where it's making double or triple that. So your $250,000 property would have to be making $500,000. Well, your $250,000 property would have to be making like $50,000 or something like that, so that you could pay the trustee and have an increase in your principal, right? Just to start with. Then you start putting properties in there, which means you got to have money to buy the property, and then go over there and add that to the trust, right? Each time you add something to an overseas trust, the property here in America is now under the structure of the overseas trust. So you're looking at having like $300,000, $500,000, which for those of us who are living from paycheck to paycheck, it's going to take us like 10 years to stack up that kind of cash. So you're probably going to establish trusts and LLCs here in America for the assets that you have. You're not likely to go and buy cash properties because it's not like you're a multimillionaire. Anybody who has $1 million to spend on more than one property to buy them cash up front is pretty well off. So this isn't going to negatively impact us on a regular basis. But if you were following this podcast for 10 or 20 years and you were relocating your money to make money for you, where you were getting back that revenue off your brokerage account, you built up the $500,000 or the $250,000, the $750,000, the $2 million worth of capital gains to utilize to leverage to buy real estate cash up front. Because when I say leverage, that's what the wealthy would have done, which is get a cash loan using their portfolio as collateral, and then take that cash loan and go buy a property cash up front. That is the moment that this kicks in, because you're avoiding taxation from selling the stocks to buy the house, because you're borrowing against the money and buying the house cash up front. But now they want to know who owns the house. Now, the paper trail starts with each time you buy a house and put the same house or put each house into the same trust, they know you're a grantor of that trust. Now, what efforts can they put into going overseas and finding out who is the beneficiary of that trust? That I don't have a lot of details to, but at least they know who bought it and who they gave it to, which is a transfer of title. So there is a bit of a paper trail there. So the new real estate rules will require professionals in the transaction to report who the buyers are, and it is going to be a pincer move designed to squeeze anonymity out of the system. The more transparent the laws force you to be, the less secretive and discreet you're legally allowed to be. You got to pay the cost to be the boss behind the scenes. In order for you to be Oz, you've got to develop the capital to stay behind the curtain. And in order for you to say that you're going to have a multi-tier, multi-country layer of protection, that means you're looking at $250,000 in 3 different countries, 3 different trusts that are generating profits to pay 3 different trustees to manage your money for you, so that the properties you have in America are not able to be watched where they know you directly own it. That's the wild stuff. Because if you're not named as one of the beneficiaries or successor beneficiaries in the American trust, then you're going to be named as one of the successor beneficiaries in one of the trusts. Now, for the average person buying a home with a mortgage, nothing changes. The bank does what it does to find out if the person that's borrowing the money has the money to pay for the property. And if you do, you're good to go. Which, if you're leveraging capital gains to borrow money from the bank, you're saying, hey, I want $500,000. Give me a mortgage. I have this $1 million portfolio that pays dividends so I can afford to pay you back. Give me a mortgage. The bank is going to vet the signer of that's it. Who it is, who signed off on the purchase of the property. And that's where the paper trail will stop until the property is put into a trust. And that's where the paper trail will stop because all they care about is who bought it, not what they did with it after they sold it or after they bought it, right? So if you are a all cash buyer, you're simply going to face more disclosure. But for the health of the housing market, it's a monumental shift. All right. Now we've covered a lot of complex and intimidating information. The big picture is going to be clear. The financial world is becoming more transparent. So what do we do about it? We don't get scared. We get smart. We don't hide. We prepare. And this isn't about finding the loopholes. It is about understanding the new rules and operating with confidence. So here are going to be your 5 protection moves for the new era. First thing you want to do is you want to know the thresholds, but don't obsess over them. Understand that the $10,000 cash triggers a CTR in most states, and in California and Texas, $200 is going to trigger that CTR. Know the current 1099K thresholds for your side hustles, for anything that you're doing through Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, or any other fintech funding source. The 1099Ks and other such is going to come from podcasters subcontracted through YouTube or if you're Uber, Lyft, whatever, the 1099s or whatever that you're going to get from your brokerage accounts, it's not necessarily a 1099K, but it's going to be a 1099, which is untaxed revenue that should be taxed. Document. You just got to know what those thresholds are, but don't treat those numbers as a cliff to be avoided. You should always go over the threshold if you can, because you got nothing to hide if you're legit. And then people who live lifestyles under financial poverty just so that they can keep getting government funds, that's not a smart move. Everybody who wants free money has the mentality to strike free money while it's hot, which allows them to do less work and get more money. But look, what you've got to understand is that if in the event that you have the capabilities of making more than poverty income, why live off of free money when you can earn big money, right? So the financial system is looking for suspicious patterns, not just a specific single number. A history of transparent transactions is far less suspicious than a history of deals engineered to be exactly $9,999. I'm going to be honest with you, instead of having $9,999, I could do 4 once a week transactions of $2,400 and actually switch it up. 2,420, 2,485, 2,415, 2,478. It's not the same. And with weekly occurrences, it's starting to look like a paycheck. But if you do the math, I just crossed over $10,000. If it's a regular reoccurring action, it's not as suspicious. But if you were trying to push $50,000 through a bank account in 30 days, you're not going to be able to do that because you'd have to do $5,000-$10,000 transactions or split it up in some kind of way when you could have just dropped the 50 grand in there the one time. Move number 2, don't play games. Be radically transparent. And this is going to be the single most important advice here. The biggest risk isn't the reporting itself, but the suspicion that you create by trying to avoid the suspicion. Never engage in structuring. Even though I just gave you a solution to structuring, never engage in it. Because it's like running from the police when you've done nothing wrong. You already know they're going to beat your ass once they catch up to you, even though you did nothing wrong. it immediately makes you look guilty when you have nothing to be guilty for. So if you have a legitimate reason to deposit $20,000 in cash, do it. When the teller asks you where it came from, tell them the truth. I sold a car, a classic car. A simple, honest answer is going to be your best defense. Because the only red flag you're going to have is if they don't know where the money came from, the bank does not want to be involved with illicit money. They will flag your money until they find out where it came from. One of the reasons why you can travel if you have the proper documents that shows that the money came from a legitimate source. If it's money from your bank account, your bank verifies that all the money that went into your bank account was legitimate money. So when you get the bank records that shows that you withdrew the money from the bank is authorizing and authenticating and verifying that the money that you have is legal tender. In order for that to happen, the bank has to make sure that the money that you have that you give to them is legal tender. So you can't just hand them a large stack of cash and don't tell them where it came from. You've got to tell them that it came from a legitimate source when you're withdrawing that money from the bank so that you can travel. If you're traveling with 10, 15, 20, $30,000, you need to have those tax forms that shows, hey, I pulled this out of my bank account and I'm taking it to another bank in another country and opening up a bank account. That way, when the feds come, they can't rob you because they'll steal your money. They'll steal your money and then they'll justify it and say that it's drug money, even though it's not. And then the burden of proof is on you to prove that it's not. Where, guess what you're going to be doing? In a court of law, in front of a room full of people, which is way worse than the one person that you talk to at the bank and the one person who read the paperwork at the airport. You're going to be in a court of law in a room full of people where you're going to have to tell them where your money came from. Worse, if you're in a civil action to get your money back, now you filed a federal document that discloses where your money came from, where it was going, and what laws protects you to make that type of which is public record. So now everybody who looks up that case law knows that you got money from a bank, got on a plane, and got robbed by the feds. You could have just got the files that you needed to get to justify where the money came from. If you proactively are transparent, you don't have to go through the unnecessary legal hurdles for being secretive. Where you want to be secretive is in social media. Where you want to be secretive is in society. So instead of doing YouTube videos and TikTok videos, posting bricks of cash up against your face so that people know you've got money, that's where you're supposed to be secretive. You're not supposed to show them society how much money you have. When you buy yourself a nice car, you're not supposed to take photos and videos of it and put it up online. When you buy yourself a new house, you're not supposed to take photos and videos of it and put it online. When you buy new nice things to go in your house, you're not supposed to post photos and videos of that online. Reason being is because if people know that you have something worth taking, the people who want it will come to where you are and take it from you. The feds just want to know that whatever you got legally. They don't give a fuck if you keep it or not, as long as you got it legally, right? So you beat if you're transparent behind the scenes on public record, it's still a secret, right? Move number 3, you want to keep impeccable records. Again, transparency. In an era of automated flagging, your personal records are going to be your shield, especially if you're self-employed, if you run your own business. First, you want to separate your personal and your business finances. Even if for some reason you decide that you're going to intertwine everything with paying off business credit cards, paying off personal debt, and then using business funds to pay off business credit cards, you want to keep your records. This is my personal income. This is my business income. That is the credit card that paid for it. That's the income that paid for the credit card. This is all the money, right? At a minimum, you want to use separate bank accounts, even if the money is being intertwined with one another, and separate payment app profiles. One of the things that actually benefits you is, say, for example, you've got an LLC, you've got a personal bank account, you need money. Instead of just zelling yourself money from your bank account, direct deposit it as a payment. It shows up in your personal bank account as a paycheck. There you go. Now, you need to do something for the business. You are going to send money back to the business as a check, money order, whatever the case may be, with an invoice attached to it. Those back and forth transactions are separate transactions. You're not spending the business bank account money on personal stuff. Like if you want to go shopping, you paid yourself and then went shopping from your own personal bank account. You need to buy something from the business. You fill out paperwork to invest in the business. You set up, whatever documents that shows that this is an investment into the business, and then have the money put into the bank account directly as a separate transaction, and then use that money under the business. These back and forth actions keeps a huge paper trail, because if you got paid and reinvested into your business, it could be reinvested into your business as shares in the company. Even if you're an LLC, a sole proprietor, whatever the case may be, it could be reinvested as shares in the company. If your contracts that you have with the company requires for you to get dividend returns, the company doesn't have to issue you a paycheck as an employee. It can issue a paycheck as a shareholder. And if you have shares at a specific dollar value, you can always sell those shares privately to other individuals and get capital gains, which can help you build your business. So instead of borrowing money from a bank and doing background checks and all this other shit to get money from a bank, all you have to do is have a business that is generating revenue, and then talk to some individuals that might want 20% ownership of the company in order to give you millions of dollars to make your business bigger. But when your business gets big enough where you don't have to do shit but get paid, it doesn't matter if you're not 100% ownership of the company. What matters is that the money is being made for everyone, because everybody's got to eat. As long as you're full, that's all that matters. Make sure that when you're on these payment apps, on these fintech apps, use that memo line in your payment apps. You want to keep those receipts. Take screenshots if necessary. And if you take a screenshot, for the love of God, label the screenshot what the screenshot was for. Don't just take a screenshot and say, fuck it, I got the screenshot. Because when you go to pull up a data file, it is going to be a series of numbers. It's not always going to be the month, date, year, and time that it was done. It could just be a random set of numbers. You're not going to know which PDF file goes to which screenshot unless you name them. And even if you take a screenshot on your cell phone, you can go into that photo, go to edit details, and then change the name from the general serial number that it was in to the actual what this photo was. So if it's Zelle transaction, sent brother groceries, 6/12/2026, that's what it is. So when you go into your files, you forward that to yourself. You can pull up in your emails, sent brother money. See what I'm saying? That's what you got to do. And good records is going to turn a potential headache with the IRS into a clear, factual discussion, which is one of the reasons why those real estate investment individuals tells you with confidence, hey, I want them to audit me because I'm making money, I'm doing good, I'm entitled to these tax deductions, and I got all my paperwork in order. I dare you to audit me. You're going to be wasting your time. I'm going to be sipping my ties, and we're going to be having a good time, right? She said, oh, so how long did it take you to make your first $1 million? That's a good question to ask anybody. Um, Typically, from when I start working in life until now, it would take 3/4 of my life to make the first $1 million, because you're gonna the difference between when you ask that question and somebody tell you genuinely the truth from when you started the project that gives you the $1 million versus when you started working in life and then realize, hey, I could have been doing something else that could have made me that $1 million is two different things. I started working when I was 9, right? And then, now I'm set up at 41. That's 3/4 of my life. Okay. Now, from 3 years ago when I started this podcast until now, that's 3 years. The difference in the magnitude is going to be from when you decide to claim that you started aiming for that $1 million versus when you got it, as opposed to from the time you started working until the time you made your first $1 million, because that's the question. How long did it take for you to make your first $1 million? From the day you started working until the day you got it, that's going to be for the average man 3/4 of their life, if not longer. But how long did it take for you to start one project and get your first $1 million out of that project? Well, that depends on which project you started and if you made $1 million off of it. And a lot of times, trial and error, we start up a lot of things, we don't finish a lot of things, and then we find ourselves in a situation where we got a bunch of failed attempts and we're still trying to make that first $1 million. So, um, when I cross the threshold of financial security, I still don't feel like I am where I want to be at. So I'm not in the scenario to say that I feel the area of relief. But what I do feel is an area of confidence that allows me to know that everybody else can do the same things that I've been talking about that will get them in the places that they want to be at so that they will be more satisfied with their lifestyle. Because if I can do it, you can do it. Now, move number 4. Comply with the Corporate Transparency Act, the CTA. There's no excuse with it. If you own an LLC, an S corporation, a C corporation, or any similar entity, this is going to be for you guys. Do not sleep on CTA. Go to the FinCEN website, read the requirements, and assume that you have to file unless you clearly fit one of those exemptions. And do not try to misrepresent yourself to yourself and assume that, well, technically, maybe I might be exempt. No, if it is not 100% guaranteed that you are exempt, if there's a 10% possibility that you're not, file. If it is 100%, like let's say, for example, if a 501c3 is exempt, and let's say you're operating a 501c3. If it's exempt because it says that it's exempt, then you're exempt. Even if you're turning over taxable income, as long as you qualify under the 501c3 in this hypothetical scenario, because I'm not telling you that it is exempt, I'm just saying that if it was exempt, then in that scenario, you wouldn't have to file because it clearly says that the structure of your business is exempt. Now, if you're operating a regular S corporation, a regular C corporation, a regular LLC, a partnership, whatever, and it doesn't say that the structure of your business is clearly exempt, then you file. I understand that you could split hairs and say, well, technically, even if our structure is this, we're technically doing this. Whatever the fuck your tax code is, that's what you're doing. You can get an EIN for a business for one reason and then decide to start doing something else with the same EIN, never changing the tax code structure of the business, and unofficially be in a completely different market than the one that you got the tax code in. Doesn't benefit you because if you had tax exemptions for the field that you were going into, it would probably be beneficial for you to change your tax status by changing your EIN identification. But this is going to be the same number. It's just going to be listed under something else, doing other business in another area, you know. But, you know, assuming that, hey, I got a for profit entity. It might have been in real estate before, but now it's in automotive. Doesn't matter. If it was listed under something, that's what it's for. Doesn't matter if you're making money in automotive. What matters is you listed it for real estate. So if it's not exempt, file. Then you want to set a reminder, usually 30 days before the expiration date. So if anything happens, you can make changes, and you want to make sure that you double check. The penalties for filing, for willfully failing to file, are not cheap, right? Then you want to move to the fifth one, the fifth strategy: building a relationship with your banker. This is not something that most people do. You might have a short conversation with the teller when you're cashing your check, but the guy in the office that never comes out and talks to anybody, that's the guy that you need to be, the bank manager. Okay. When we say banker, we're not talking about the person that handles your money at the behind the bulletproof glass. We're talking about the person in the office that the teller has to go get to get authorization to do things on your account. The authority in the room. You want to be friends with that guy, right? Okay, so which is best, an LLC, an LCC, or an INC? Well, that really depends on what you're doing. Um, you have a C corporation, you have an LLC, and you have an S corporation. So you got to remember that first and foremost. Um, so that's almost like a trick question. Um, most businesses are incorporated, and that's what the INC stands for, is incorporated, and that means that it's a, a, a corporate structure, right? Well, technically, you have the corporated and the incorporated structures, but that's just the design of either the LLC, the S corporation, or the C corporation. So you got to understand that. Um, so you have the abbreviations are going to be like um, different types of structures for the type of business that you have. For the most part, what you have to recognize is that a sole proprietorship is just you working by yourself for yourself, self-employed kind of situation. Doesn't have as many tax deductions as an LLC, because an LLC will give you business tax credits for business expenses that can be utilized for tax deductions towards your taxable income, towards your W 2s. So if they're taking money out of your paycheck for working for somebody else, and you have an LLC where you're running your own business over here, then you would have a larger refund, because business tax deductions plays a role in your tax bill, where your already removed taxed income from your W-2 paycheck can now be reimbursed to you in full. Now you got to understand there's a difference between tax deduction and a tax credit. A deduction means that they subtract from the amount of money that the IRS says that you owe, anywhere from 100% of what they say you owe down to zero. But if you owe less than zero, you don't get anything back, because it is a deduction. You can't deduct from zero. Now, a credit is a payment towards taxation that can cover either 100% of what you owe, or be reimbursed if the credit that they apply to your tax bill is more than the debt that you owe. So, say you have a $2,000 stimulus tax credit. If you owed $800 of taxation, they might give you the difference of $1,200 of tax credit. But let's say that you had $10,000 worth of taxable income. Like, that's how much you owed. And you had, say, $12,000 worth of deductions. Only $10,000 of it would be credited to your tax bill, where you would owe nothing. The other $2,000 is just kind of lost. They're not going to give you back the other $2,000 because it's a deduction. Now, the difference between an LLC and a C corporation is that a C corporation can get 10% for donating to nonprofit entities. C corporations also have a cap of 20%, where LLCs can be taxed up to 35%. S corporations can be taxed normally towards your regular individual income through 1099s and other such. C corporations are standalone entities, separate from you. LLCs are limited, but still have liability, less liability than a C corporation. C corporation, the entire infrastructure. If you've got 12 different business structures across 12 different states and somebody decides they want to come after you, they can C corporation and all of your company is at risk. LLC, this particular transaction up to the amount of this transaction, and the only punitive damages above that is based off of my negligence and the local laws in the city state that you're suing me in, which is different because if I've got other branches somewhere else, this LLC, it kind of limits what you get access to. So it really depends on what you're doing it for. It depends which one you would benefit from based on how you operate. Because again, you have a 501c3 structure that allows for tax exemption only if 74% of your income is taxable income, which means 36% of your income has to be donations. If you're not getting 36% donations, then 100% of your money is taxable income. So if you can show financial proof that you're getting more than 50% of your income as taxable income, then you can file and show them, hey, I'm not making enough money for you to tax me on this money. And 100% of the money be tax free. Now, you also have to understand that with a 501c3, you have two different types of structures when you're not a church. Because with a church, you don't have to report at all. They do get audited, but they only get audited because of other reasons. Like that pastor that had 3 private jets, $10,000 worth of Louis Vuitton stuff, and a $52 million house for himself. So yeah, you can in fact see churches get audited, but for the most part, since they don't have to pay taxes, they don't have to report a lot of the stuff. However, a 501c3 is typically a publicly funded nonprofit. There are nonprofits that are privately funded, which is a different one. So you have a publicly funded nonprofit versus the private funded nonprofit. And the difference between the two is that you have the dollar for dollar tax deduction for a public funded nonprofit that does not apply to a privately funded nonprofit. A privately funded nonprofit means that a closed entity is the only thing that donates to that particular thing, that structure. A publicly funded nonprofit means anybody can donate to this particular entity. So going off of the 501c3, you got two types of forms. You got the 990N postcard and the 990. The 990N postcard is when you're making less than $50,000 a year or a total of $150,000 over the course of the last 3 years. If you don't have $500,000 worth of property under the ownership of that nonprofit, then you file a 990N postcard and you don't have to report your earnings. But if you're rolling in it, if you're bringing in $200,000 a year worth of income, if you own properties under the LLC or under the 501c3, then yeah, you got to pay $400 for the 990Ns and send it to them so that you can tell them, this is what my money looks like. This is why I still shouldn't have to pay you anything because all of this money is donated. These buildings are utilized for whatever purposes financially, because you're only giving them financial records. You're not giving them like operational records because this is the IRS, right? So all of that plays into another factor because again, if you have access to a 501c3 and you have an access to an LLC, a C corporation, an S corporation, the C corporation can donate to the nonprofit for tax deduction, and the nonprofit can perform, if you have a real estate investment trust, a joint venture. All the money has to be separate. You have to have separate bank accounts, and you have to have transactions that are separate from one another that are heavily documented, where you're showing that these two entities are not the same factor. And you can have executive boards of a for-profit on the executive board of a nonprofit, as long as they're not benefiting directly from the nonprofit. So there's a lot of stuff involved when you're looking at this, but the details in documents is what you need to collect and provide so that you can prove that you're on the up and up, right? So when you go to your branch, you want to get to know the people that are at your local branch, especially if you're a small business owner. If you have a large, unusual transaction coming up, if you give the bankers a heads up, you call them up and let them know, hey, I'm about to go to the Cayman Islands. You're going to start seeing transactions from the Cayman Islands. Hey, I'm planning on trying to buy this brand new car. You're going to see me spend $8,000 on a brand new car. All of these things prevents them. They are notating the stuff on your account. It doesn't necessarily stop the fraud protection from triggering, but it does reduce their ability to file SARS reports, making them freeze your accounts. Right? Explain the situation in advance, and this can stop legitimate transactions from being flagged as suspicious, where they're reporting it to the IRS. It doesn't always stop the automatic system, but it does allow for an easier capabilities for a manual override. So you might be at a Walmart spending $10,000 on some shit. But when you do, if you call them beforehand, you don't spend 45 minutes at the register trying to rectify the situation, right? A banker who knows you is going to be your best advocate inside of the system. A human who can override a cold algorithm makes things better than trying to talk to somebody over the phone. So even though we have the capabilities of doing stuff online and doing stuff through chats and doing stuff, over the computer, it is way better for you to get to know your local in the branch people who are going to be directly impacted by the transactions that you're doing. So we started with the scary headlines about your money disappearing, and we've replaced that fear with the facts and a plan. The move towards greater financial transparency is real and it is accelerating. So, with the laws like the Corporate Transparency Act and the new reporting rules, the government is determined to shine a light into the corners of the financial system. And it's all of the corners of the financial system. But the empowering takeaway is that these rules are not about your money vanishing. Your FDIC and NCUA insurances is still the bedrock of protecting your finances. These changes are about the death of financial anonymity. It's the ability to keep yourself invisible. There's not going to be a thing anymore. And while we can debate the privacy implications for the average law-abiding citizen, this is not a cause for panic. It is a cause for preparation. I tell you guys on a regular basis to navigate around the things that are outside of your control. This is one of those things. The headlines will always try to scare you or clickbait you into coming to take a look. But informed, prepared people will always win. You don't have to be a financial expert. You just have to understand the core principles that directly impact you. Pay attention to transparency because transparency beats being clever. Good records are your best defense. Even when you're not operating above board, if you've got good records to replicate being above board, you're less in distress when a flashlight is shined on your situation. And compliance with standard protocols is an option. You typically start having red flags shined on you when compliance doesn't happen. Now, here's going to be your next step. You want to take a calm look at your own finances, do your own small business, make a CTA your top priority if you do own your own small business. Do you mix your business and personal payments together on an app? If so, take 10 minutes to set up a system to keep those transactions separate as much as possible. And most importantly, decide to stop reacting to fear and start acting on the knowledge. Now, you are now more informed than 99% of the people about how these rules actually work. I want you to use that. Then ask yourself, what are the biggest questions about these changes? Have you had experience with a CTR before, or a 1099K, or that new BOI report? Drop that information in the comment section. Let's build a community of financially confident people and continue this conversation. Because I'm going to come back and talk to y'all about it next week when I be like, hey, remember I said last week X, Y, and Z, A, B, and C? I'm going to remind y'all, we're going to keep this going because we want to make sure that we're in the know on the things that are proactively, directly impacting us today. Now, that's all I have for y'all for today. We got a lot of stuff coming up for the rest of the week. I want y'all to make sure that y'all like and subscribe. Y'all go and check the channel, hit the notification button on all the shows that are coming up because we should be starting close to on time, around about 11:30 Eastern Standard Time. Most days out of the week. I want you guys to see that. I think Saturday probably going to be later than that. Saturday's probably going to be closer to midnight. I got to double check. Because I got some things that I got to do shortly after Friday night show, and I'm probably not going to be able to get back here until around about that time for Saturday night show. But the rest of the week, everything's going to be fine. So, with that being said, I'm going to start off by saying, ladies, as long as the situation doesn't make sense, I'm going to keep asking you ladies to make it make sense. So, ladies, please make it make sense. And fellas, I give you all this information to make you guys higher value men, not just to improve your financial life, but also to improve your decision-making skills, because your decision-making skills directly impacts your finances. Make sure that you pay attention to the things that are inside of your control. Find the things that you don't like, proactively put in effort to change that. Then take the extra effort that you have left over, the strength and peace of mind that you've gained, and start navigating around the things that are outside of your control. Ladies, while this is a male-driven podcast from the male's perspective, you too can build yourself to be a higher value woman. Well, it does require you to pay attention to your 20 and 30-year plan. You got to know where you want to be at when this is all over, right? Reverse engineer that's what you got to do today to get there. And then as you stay dedicated to your 20 and 30-year goals, you want to keep your eyes and ears open for the potential suitors with the personality and characteristics, drive, ambition, dedication, motivation, determination, integrity, to achieve their own goals. Then you want to see what those goals are. And then you're welcome, Uncommon Woman. I'll definitely see you tomorrow night if you got time. And then, ladies, after you find out what kind of goals they have, you determine if their goals are long-term satisfaction goals like your goals or short-term gratification goals, because they don't have to be the exact same goals that you have, but they have to be heading in the exact same direction. And when you find that two people can conquer those goals a lot faster, where two people, I tell you guys, can make $1 million faster than one. But it really requires you guys to be proactive about developing long-term satisfaction goals. And your long-term satisfaction goals are structurally designed to be an end-all to all of what you're trying to be, where your work ethic no longer applies to your financial benefits. It is the residuals from your past efforts. It is the passive from your previous efforts, the income that will pay you for the remainder of your days, so that you don't have to worry about where money is coming from, right? You don't want to be 95 years old and dying on a clock. You want to say, well, in my 40s, I want to retire by 60. I want to have X, Y, and Z kind of lifestyle. In my 40s, I want to retire by 65. Where I'm putting 25 years towards it, so that I can retire where there's X, Y, and Z money coming in, where I have more money coming in than I have expenses, so that I don't have a stressful life. That's what needs to be done. Okay, now that's all I got for you guys for tonight. Special shout out to Uncommon Woman, Steven. Special shout out to Michael, OG Kicks. I really appreciate y'all for coming to the show. So thank you for coming to This and That. I'm your host, Xander, where we talk about this, that, and everything in between. And I will see you guys tomorrow night.
Just